I grew up believing that peace had a sound. The low hum of wind weaving through pine trees, the creak of the old porch swing my father built, the soft crackle of firewood that always smelled faintly of cedar. Our family cabin wasn't just a place. It was him. Every nail, every beam held a story of the man who taught me that love isn't loud, it's steady. After he passed, the cabin became my refuge. When the world felt too sharp, I'd drive up the winding road, windows down, letting the scent of pine needles calm my heart. Inside, his flannel still hung by the door, and the carved initials in the banister still read, D+M+C+D+E forever, the promise my parents made long before I existed. It was my inheritance, yes, but more than that, it was my last living connection to who I used to be before life got complicated. When I married Ethan, I thought I was building something just as lasting. He used to sit with me on that porch, claiming he loved how simple it felt there. No noise, no business calls, just us. I believed him. I believed everything. I even let him handle the paperwork when we merged our finances, because that's what trust looks like in marriage, right? So imagine my confusion when a realtor called one Tuesday morning, cheerful as ever, congratulating me on the quick sale of my property. I thought she had the wrong number. My property? She said, yes, the cabin in Pine Ridge. Closed yesterday. Great deal, $60,000 cash. $60,000. My father's cabin was worth at least 5 times that. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I remember standing in the kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, watching the steam fade from my coffee, realizing my hands were shaking. That's when it hit me. The papers I'd signed months ago. The ones Ethan said were just refinancing. He hadn't just sold a building. He'd sold my father's legacy, and he hadn't told me a word. And the worst part? I hadn't even begun to uncover why. When I first met Ethan, he was the kind of man who made confidence look effortless. The kind of smile that made waitresses linger a little too long. And the kind of voice that made you feel safe even when you didn't know why. We met at a charity gala downtown. He was wearing a navy suit, talking about market trends like he personally controlled them. I was there on behalf of my father's foundation, still learning to navigate a world where family money came with more responsibility than comfort. He laughed easily, asked questions that made me feel seen, and when he talked about his career in financial advising, I thought, finally, someone who understands structure and stability. My father had always managed everything, and when he was gone, I didn't want to carry that burden alone. So when Ethan offered to help me organize the boring stuff, I didn't hesitate. Soon, helping turned into handling. He updated my will, streamlined my accounts, merged our assets for convenience. Every step came with his reassurance. You don't need to worry about this, babe. I've got us covered. And I believed him. He'd bring home takeout after long workdays, open his laptop and joke, I'm crunching numbers so you can keep dreaming about that cabin. It sounded romantic. Teamwork, shared goals. I didn't notice the subtle shift. How he started signing things without asking. How ours became his. He told me I was too sentimental about that cabin. That we could put the money to better use. I laughed it off, calling him practical. But the truth is, I liked being the soft one, the trusting one. The woman who didn't have to read the fine print because her husband already had. Looking back, I can pinpoint the exact moment I lost control. The day I said, do whatever you think is best, he smiled, kissed my forehead, and said the same 5 words he always did. Trust me, I handle everything. I didn't realize it then, but those words weren't a promise. They were a warning. I just didn't hear it yet. The call came on a Wednesday morning. One of those unremarkable mid-weeks when everything feels routine. I was in the middle of sorting laundry when an unfamiliar number flashed on my phone. Mrs. Carter, the woman said brightly. Just calling to congratulate you on the quick sale of your Pine Ridge property. $60,000 in cash. Smoothest closing I've seen in months. I froze. I'm sorry, I said slowly. You must have the wrong person. But she didn't. She read off the address. My father's cabin. My sanctuary. My heart started to pound so loud it drowned out her voice. I remember staring at the window, watching sunlight fall across the floor, trying to convince myself there had been some mistake. By the time Ethan walked through the door that evening, my mind was a storm. He tossed his keys on the counter, loosened his tie, and smiled at me like it was any other day. "Ethan," I said, keeping my voice steady, "did you sell my cabin?" He blinked, confused at first, then laughed. "Oh, that. Yeah, sweetheart, don't be mad. It was just sitting there empty. Figured we could flip it, invest the cash, maybe upgrade the house. I was going to tell you tonight." He said it so casually. I was going to tell you tonight, like selling my father's legacy was no different than picking a new rug. "You had no right," I said, feeling the words scrape out of my throat. "Babe," he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's just property. I'll buy it back when the market cools, okay? Don't get emotional." That word, emotional, landed like a slap. He reached for my shoulder, but I stepped back. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make him feel even an ounce of what I felt. Betrayal, disbelief, grief. But instead I just stared at him, because something about the way he avoided my eyes, the way his smile faltered when I didn't speak. It wasn't guilt I saw, it was fear. He wasn't just hiding a lie. He was hiding something bigger. That night, when he fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table under the hum of the fridge, scrolling through property records on my laptop, and that's when I saw it. My name, forged in smooth, perfect cursive on a signature line I never touched. Something in his eyes told me. He wasn't sorry. He was scared. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that forged signature. My name, written like a weapon. Ethan's breathing was steady beside me, the kind of deep sleep only the guilty manage. Around 2 a.m., I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake him. The house was quiet, except for the soft hum of the fridge and the tick of the hallway clock, the kind of silence that makes you feel like even the walls are listening. His office door creaked when I pushed it open. That room had always been his domain. He said it was just boring finance stuff, so I'd never bothered to look. But that night, I couldn't stop myself. The desk was immaculate, too immaculate. Files stacked in perfect symmetry, drawers locked. I started with the obvious, his laptop. Password protected, no surprise there. Then I checked the drawers. The top two opened easily, just bills, receipts, business cards. The bottom drawer wouldn't budge. I tried a letter opener first, then the spare keys we kept in a jar. Nothing. I almost gave up, until I remembered the small keychain he carried, the one with a faded Cabo 2019 tag. I snuck back into the bedroom, heart pounding, and gently slid it from his nightstand. It fit. Inside the drawer were manila folders, thick, heavy, organized by months, and labeled with neat handwriting. I sat on the floor, flipping through them one by one. Property deeds, bank statements, client transfers. My hands trembled as I scanned line after line of numbers I barely understood. And then I saw it. My father's cabin, listed as asset liquidation, immediate. Next to it, Ethan's initials. My chest tightened. But what froze me completely was another document tucked behind it. An account summary titled Offshore Client Portfolio, under the Purpose column. I read, Consultancy fees, cash laundering management. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Laundering, the word echoed in my head like a gunshot. This wasn't about greed anymore. He wasn't just selling property. He was cleaning dirty money through my family's assets. Through my name, I heard a floorboard creak upstairs. My heart stopped. Had he woken up? I shoved everything back into the drawer, relocked it, and crept out of the room, clutching one sheet I couldn't bear to return. Proof of what he was doing. As I stood in the dark hallway, staring at the paper shaking in my hands, one thought cut through the fear like a blade. My husband wasn't just greedy, he was laundering money. The next morning, I woke up before Ethan, pretending everything was fine. I made coffee, packed his briefcase, even kissed him goodbye like nothing had happened. My reflection in the kitchen window looked calm, almost peaceful, but inside I was calculating every move. That day, I called 2 people, my sister, Claire, a paralegal who could smell legal trouble from a mile away, and Mark, Ethan's longtime business partner. I told them we were hosting dinner, casual, intimate, Just to catch up, I said lightly. Ethan didn't suspect a thing. In fact, he looked relieved when I mentioned it over lunch. See? He grinned. Told you we'd get back to normal. The word made my skin crawl. I spent the rest of the afternoon setting the table like I was preparing for an ambush. Candles, wine, our best plates. Everything looked picture perfect. But every click of the silverware, every folded napkin, was just another piece of armor. By the time the doorbell rang, my heart was a steady drumbeat of purpose. Claire walked in first, her eyes sharp, scanning the room like she already knew. Then Mark, cheerful, oblivious, talking about golf and quarterly returns. Ethan played the charming host, pouring wine, cracking jokes. To anyone else, it looked like a normal dinner. But I watched him closely. The way his hand tightened around his glass when Claire asked casual questions about his new clients. He brushed them off easily, but his smile started to fade when she mentioned the word offshore. I kept my voice soft, even sweet. I'm so proud of you, honey, I said, placing a hand on his. Especially with how well your consulting business is going. His eyes flicked toward me, wary now, searching. I smiled, slow and deliberate, feeling my pulse steady. Because he had no idea that while he was busy rehearsing lies, I'd already called someone that morning. Someone who didn't need an invitation to dinner. I smiled through dinner, knowing exactly who I had called that morning. After everyone left that night, I sat alone at the table. The candle wax hardened into stillness. The dishes were untouched, but my thoughts were anything but. Every sound of the house, the ticking clock, the hum of the fridge, pulled me back into memories I had tried to ignore. I remembered the late-night phone calls, the ones he took in the garage, speaking in low tones, his back always turned. When I asked who it was, he'd chuckle and say, "Clients in different time zones, babe." I remembered the business trips that never matched the receipts I found later. And that one time I mentioned our accountant, and his entire mood flipped, eyes sharp, voice raised. "You don't trust me?" he barked. I said no, of course I did. But that night, I lay awake, wondering when exactly I had stopped meaning it. It all made sense now. Every oversight, every sudden bank withdrawal, every excuse about moving assets. He hadn't just been preparing for this sale. He'd been preparing for an escape. The grief hit me first. That hollow, dizzy kind of grief that doesn't even let you cry properly. Then came the anger. Anger that I'd let him make me small, that I'd let love blind me to manipulation dressed as protection. I looked around our home, the house he said was ours, the life he built on my trust. And I realized it was all leverage to him. Every memory we made was a calculated move on a board I never knew we were playing. But beneath the heartbreak, something new was rising. A calm. A kind of clarity I hadn't felt in years. I whispered into the quiet, "You've played your game, Ethan. Now it's my turn." The next morning, I started making copies. Of everything. The emails, the transfers, the offshore accounts. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was planning, and as I sealed those folders, I finally understood. Betrayal hurts most when it comes from the person you trusted completely. But it heals fastest when you decide to stop being their victim. Dinner looked perfect. Candlelight, roasted chicken, laughter echoing faintly between glasses of wine. You'd never know there was a storm coiled under the tablecloth. Ethan was in his element, talking about client growth and asset strategies, gesturing with his glass like some Wall Street magician. Claire listened politely, though her eyes never left him. Mark seemed distracted, maybe guilty, maybe just caught between loyalty and curiosity. I waited until the plates were nearly empty. Timing mattered. I poured Ethan another glass of wine, leaned back, and smiled. "So, honey," I said casually, "did you ever get that check from the cabin sale cleared?" His fork stopped midair. The faintest tremor ran through his hand. Mark's eyes flicked toward him, then toward me. "Cabin sale?" he asked, confused. Ethan forced a laugh, but it came out too sharp. "Oh, that old thing. Yeah, handled. Just a quick transaction. I tilted my head, studying him like a stranger. That's odd, because I looked at our account this morning, and I didn't see the deposit. His jaw tightened. You checked the account? Claire leaned in slightly, her tone sweet but cutting. She has every right to. It is a joint account, isn't it? The silence that followed was deafening. I reached into my purse and pulled out a stack of papers, printouts of transfers, shell accounts, and wire receipts. I laid them gently on the table like cards in a game I just learned how to play. Funny thing, I said, my voice steady. You didn't just sell the cabin. You've been moving money for months, to names I don't recognize. Offshore clients, consulting fees. Care to explain? Ethan's face drained of color. His partner shifted uncomfortably, muttering something about needing fresh air. Claire crossed her arms, a quiet smirk forming. You went through my files? He snapped, the mask slipping. I went through what was left of our marriage, I replied softly. He pushed back his chair abruptly, the legs screeching against the floor. You don't know what you've done, he hissed, but before he could take another breath, before I could even answer, this doorbell rang, and that's when the doorbell rung. The sound of the doorbell sliced through the silence like a verdict. 3 rings, firm, deliberate, and final. Ethan's head snapped toward the door, confusion flashing across his face. Who the hell? Before anyone could answer, I stood. I'll get it, I said softly. When I opened the door, 2 men stood there, dark suits, stern faces, the kind of presence that filled a room before they even stepped inside. The taller one flipped open a badge. Mrs. Bennett? Yes. We're with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We're here for your husband. The world seemed to shrink around us. Ethan's chair screeched as he stood up so fast it nearly toppled. There must be some mistake, he stammered. This is ridiculous. The lead agent's voice was calm but cutting. Ethan Bennett, you're under investigation for wire fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. We have a warrant for your arrest. Claire's fork clinked against her plate. Mark muttered a curse under his breath. Ethan turned to me, his face a mixture of panic and disbelief. Did you call them? I didn't move. Didn't speak. I just looked at him, the man who once promised to protect me, and said nothing. My silence was louder than any confession. The agent stepped forward. Sir, we need you to come with us. He tried to laugh it off, voice cracking under the weight of it. You can't just, this is insane. I have powerful clients. I can fix this! But the agents didn't flinch. One read him his rights as the other cuffed his wrists, the metallic click echoing through the room like punctuation to his lies. He turned to me one last time. You don't understand. It wasn't supposed to go this way. I met his gaze evenly. No, I said quietly. It wasn't. He froze, because in that moment he realized the truth. I had known. Every lie, every transfer, every signature he thought he forged in the dark, I had seen it all. As they led him out, the tension in the air broke like a fever. I sank into my chair, my pulse steady for the first time in months. The door closed behind them. The house felt lighter, almost free. I looked down at the papers still scattered across the table, then whispered to myself, half in disbelief, half in triumph. Turns out the cabin wasn't the only thing he sold. The flashing red and blue lights painted the walls in waves of color. Through the window, I watched as Ethan was guided into the back of the black SUV. A man who once strutted through boardrooms now stumbling in handcuffs. As I stood there, still processing the silence he left behind, one of the agents returned. He was younger, polite but unreadable. Mrs. Bennett? He asked. Yes? He handed me a sealed folder. This is for your records. It contains property verification from the earlier report. You might want to take a look. When the door closed, I sat down at the table, the folder heavy in my hands. My fingers trembled as I flipped through the pages, line after line of legal documentation, all leading to one final document. Property transfer, the cabin in the Pines. Buyer, Silverleaf Holdings, LLC. My breath caught, because Silverleaf wasn't just any company. It was mine. I'd created it weeks ago, quietly, using my maiden name and Claire's legal connections. The moment I discovered Ethan's forged sale, I'd traced the buyer, the broker, the funds, and I'd bought it back before the ink on his fake signature even dried. The best part? The $60,000 used in the transaction came straight from one of his offshore accounts, the same ones he thought were hidden from me. All legally transferred, all documented. I had used his own greed to undo his crime. I leaned back in my chair, the realization washing over me slowly. He had stolen from me to build his illusion of power. And I had taken that illusion apart, one signature at a time. Out the window, I could still see the faint red-blue reflection fading into the night. Somewhere out there, he was finally facing consequences. Meanwhile, my father's cabin, my peace, my legacy, was safe, waiting in the quiet pines where it had always belonged. Claire appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, a proud smile tugging at her lips. "You really thought of everything, didn't you?" I smiled faintly, exhaling for what felt like the first time in years. "No," I said softly. I just stopped underestimating myself. I looked down at the folder once more, the proof, the closure, the symbol of everything I'd reclaimed. In the end, he sold the cabin. But I bought back my freedom. It didn't take long for the headlines to start. By morning, his face was everywhere. Local financial advisor arrested in multi-million-dollar fraud investigation. The same magazines that once praised his visionary leadership now dissected his downfall with clinical precision. Every smiling photo of him shaking hands or cutting ribbons looked like a ghost from another life. Within a week, his firm collapsed. His business partners vanished like smoke, each releasing a carefully worded statement about their shock and disappointment. The clients he bragged about turned on him overnight, filing lawsuits, freezing accounts, clawing back whatever they could. And the friends, the ones who used to toast him at rooftop bars and quote his success stories, couldn't seem to remember his number anymore. His empire of charm and deceit crumbled faster than anyone imagined, because it had never been built on truth, just manipulation and borrowed time. I didn't speak to the press. I didn't need to. But the letters started coming, from people I didn't know, people he had swindled or pressured or deceived. Some had lost savings, others their dignity. One woman wrote, "Because of you, he can't do this to anyone else." Another simply said, "Thank you for not staying silent. I read every single one." They didn't bring joy exactly, but they brought peace. Every empire falls eventually. But there's a rare kind of justice when it collapses not from force, but from truth finally stepping into the light. Ethan used to say money could buy silence. Turns out, honesty was the one thing he could never afford. I folded the last letter and set it beside the folder marked Silverleaf Holdings, the proof of everything he'd underestimated. His empire had fallen. Mine was just beginning. The air smelled the same as it always had. Pine, rain, and the faint trace of cedar smoke. The cabin stood there, unchanged by time or betrayal, waiting for me like it always did. I parked the car at the edge of the dirt path and walked the last stretch, boots crunching softly against fallen needles. The sun had dipped low behind the trees, casting long golden ribbons through the windows. For a moment, I swear I could almost see my father standing there, hammer in hand, smiling the way he used to when life was simple and love was certain. Inside, everything was as I remembered. The old rocking chair, the quilt Mom made, the faint creak in the floorboard by the fireplace. I opened the windows, let the mountain breeze sweep through, and felt something inside me unclench. The weight, the noise, the anger, all of it. This place had once been my refuge, then my loss, then my mission. Now, it was my proof that you can be betrayed, broken, and still rebuild yourself stronger than before. I lit a small fire, its warmth flickering across the wooden walls. The crackle filled the silence, but it wasn't the heavy kind anymore. It was soft, sacred, the kind of silence that means you've finally stopped fighting ghosts. I took the folder from my bag. the one marked Silverleaf Holdings, and placed it in my father's old chest. Then I sat by the window, wrapped in a blanket, listening to the wind weave through the trees like a lullaby. He had taken my home once, with arrogance, deceit, and a forged signature. But tonight, standing in the heart of everything he'd underestimated, I realized something far more powerful. He took my home, but I took back my life. The fire burned steady, the pines whispered outside, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of the quiet, because the quiet meant peace. And peace meant I had finally come home. It was a gray morning in early spring when the call came. The kind of quiet, overcast day that makes you pause before answering, like the world already knows what's about to be said. "Mrs. Bennett?" a calm voice asked. "This is Agent Morris from the Bureau. I just wanted to inform you. The case is officially closed." For a moment, I didn't breathe. "Closed?" "Yes, ma'am. Ethan Bennett pled guilty to all charges: wire fraud, embezzlement, money laundering. The sentencing was finalized this morning. 20 years, no parole." I sank into the chair by the window, staring out at the pines swaying against the light drizzle. "I see," the agent's tone softened. "I thought you should know. The evidence you turned in, especially the offshore records and those account ledgers, they were the turning point. Without them, the case wouldn't have held." "Thank you," I said quietly. "For everything." He paused before hanging up. "No, Mrs. Bennett, thank you. Not many people would have had the courage to do what you did." The line clicked off. I sat there for a while, the phone still warm in my hand, listening to the soft hum of rain against the cabin roof. It wasn't joy I felt. Not exactly. Just a deep, quiet release. Like the earth had exhaled. I walked to the mantel and touched the old photo of my father, standing beside this very cabin, hammer in hand, grin as wide as the sky. I smiled through the tears I didn't even realize had fallen. "Dad," I whispered, "you would have been proud." Outside, the clouds broke just enough for a single ray of sunlight to cut through the trees, landing right on the old rocking chair. Justice had been served. The lies were gone. The house, the legacy, the peace, all mine again. And as I stood there, the world finally still, I realized the truth I'd been chasing all along. When someone sells your peace, buy it back, with truth.